I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, June 8th, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Thank you for being here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hellman, we have some items in the table file. Can you update us?
We do. We have an updated superintendent focus areas final report. There is also an updated student citizenship handbook that includes the updated name for our new director of human resources. There's an overnight field trip request, many personnel items, and then in addition, there is an updated version of the ice arena lease.
Right. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Jeff?
No, I was waiting for motion.
Okay. All right, board members, please make sure your mic is on so we can record your votes. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes. Kelly, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? All right, we'll move on to item 4, which is announcements and recognitions.
Yes, we have quite a few announcements this evening, just that time of year. So we want to, first of all, congratulate our latest Northfield High School alumni. We held graduation at the high school yesterday, and we went back through, it looks like it was the first time since 2010 that we held a commencement exercise inside. And so for people just to understand, we don't have enough equipment to set up both outside and inside. So a call has to be made by around 10 a.m. And I just want to thank Tracy Clausen and the grounds crew, Justin Robely, who did an excellent job working with emergency management and also working with the National Weather Service. Chris Dibble, Lori Christofferson from the high school, who does so much with commencement, and just really appreciate a joyful and efficient ceremony, yet warm, and just appreciate everyone's cooperation and understanding. We also held the ALC commencement last Thursday, a very different ceremony, very meaningful, and just appreciate board members who were able to attend both of those. According to the high school office, there were 350 students who walked yesterday. 10 of those were from the ALC, and that's a great thing that we changed over the years, that ALC students can participate in both the ceremony on Thursday, and they can also walk in the commencement at the high school. A total of 25 ALC students, my understanding, who received their diploma this spring. Of course, ALC students can graduate at a variety of different times during the year, but can participate in ceremonies now. And we actually had 25 students who qualified for a Northfield High School diploma through the Big 9 online, and so some of those students participated in the commencement, and some choose not to, and that's okay. But just trying to give you a full picture of this year's graduating class. Got the information from the high school office this afternoon. We want to congratulate Claire Forbord, who earned 3rd place in her individual event at the National Business Professionals of America competition. That is the highest national finish ever achieved by a Northfield BPA student. So just congratulations to Claire and Teresa Wilson, the advisor there. I want to congratulate the Northfield High School baseball team qualifying for the state tournament. The Raiders defeated Casa Manorville 13-8 in the section championship game last week, and they'll play their first game in the state tournament this Thursday, June 11th, against Mankato West. We go all the way to the state tournament to play a Big 9 foe, an opponent, so we'll play Mankato West 12:30 p.m. That's at Chaska Athletic Park. Just an amazing feat by Micaiah Patrika, who won the state championship title at the state track and field meet last week in the 800 meters with a time of 2:11.25. That is obviously, it's a school record, and it's also now a Class AA record. So congratulations to Micaiah, quite an accomplishment. And I've had a number of other people throughout the state tell me Micaiah can run, and really well respected, and congratulations to Micaiah on a state championship. We want to congratulate the following Northfield High School students: Casely Peico Romero, Odin Bowen, and Kaylee Ford, who earned their Serve Safe Food Protection Manager certification through our culinary arts program. So thanks to Chef Zank and embedding that as part of the curriculum there. So those students can go and they can be a food service manager. It's a good career pathway right out of high school. So thanks to them. Farm days were recently held at each elementary school, and Tiffany Courtbine, Greenville Park, organizes those efforts across the district, and Northfield High School FFA advisor TJ Austin also coordinates the FFA students to support all of those farm day events. We understand that the 4th and 5th grade track and field day, a great rite of passage each year, was a huge success. We want to thank Sherry McCabe, Paul Bernard, Andy James, Ryan Peach, John Scheil, and Jillian Specht for organizing that annual event. And this was just, we just finished the season of music programs. So orchestra and band and choir at all levels. I attended almost all of them, really well attended. And you can just tell that the joy that music education brings to our community. So want to thank all of our music staff. They really support each other very well. Those music staff are at all of each other's concerts. And so it's a couple of week period where they're there just about every night and big crowds every night as well. So those are your announcements for this evening, and thanks for letting us highlight those students and faculty.
Excellent. Board members, do you have any announcements or recognitions? Hey, Ben.
I don't know if we have a slot on the agenda, so I'm going to use this opportunity to recognize Dr. Hillman. Just from my perspective, I know this is the last board meeting that I'll be at, where this is last year official board meeting for you. I'll be brief. Brevity is the soul of the wit. I can't promise the latter, but I'll shoot for the former. I got to know Matt, I think first at Prairie Creek when I was the board chair there, and that's where I got to learn you get hot sometimes. Like we were in the director's office going through the evaluation for Prairie Creek, and Dr. Hillman was sitting there sweating a little bit, and you broke out your portable fan, and I was a little worried because I was like, oh wait, this is not going to go well. Like, are we not getting assessed well? Is that why he's so hot? No, it turns out that, man,
Small room,
you
big
just
sun,
run
yes.
hot. Exactly, which I appreciate. Yesterday after the indoor graduation, like I was jealous of your portable fan, and I pretended I was too tough to need one, but in fact, I would have benefited. I think I just want to recognize in my career, I've had the chance to work, in government and academia and industry, and how rare it is to have somebody that's such a servant leader that, Matt is and what he represents in that role. So, I had the chance to work with, many people throughout my career, but I think, you really stand apart. I actually went, true story, to Wikipedia today to say, well, is Matt in there? Like, I don't know. He probably should be. He was, runner-up for National Superintendent of the Year. Not yet, Matt. You're not in Wikipedia
That's okay.
yet. Exactly.
We'd like to stay out of Wikipedia.
You never know. There might be a good reason to be in there. But, I think if you do get in there, you will definitely link to servant leader, when we look up that definition as well, because, there's few people that would want a job where you have 7 bosses and so many other constituents, and people get mad at you for what the weather does and doesn't do. And through it all, I think I've really appreciated your thoughtfulness in the way that you approach trying to develop a true culture of leadership and support where you have been here in the district for the last 10 years. And I think Northfield's better for it, and certainly the students of the district are better for your time and service. I appreciate that whenever we meet, you always ask, is there something that I can be doing better for you? And that's certainly something that I've taken into my practice as well as I work with others. So just wanted to recognize the last 10 years and say that we'll miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben, for that. Excellent. Anybody else? Okay, Amy and then Jenny.
I also wanted to share a little memory about Dr. Hillman that I have. And of course, I brought an artifact. This was actually a handwritten letter that he wrote me and sent me in the mail back when I was not a school board member yet, so I was just a parent, and I had come in to talk to him about some concerns. So it's dated 8/23/22. Dear Jenny, thank you for taking the time to come in and visit during my recent listening sessions. So those were the parent listening sessions. I appreciated meeting you and getting to know you. Don't hesitate to reach out if I can assist you in any way. Matt Hillman. And so that special handwritten, those notes and things like that, I really appreciate that, and that's something that I'm really going to miss.
First, I'm going to backtrack a bit and mention Science Rocks at Spring Creek
Yes.
School.
Excellent.
And the 5th graders and all the teachers, it was fantastic. So shout out to them. But now I'm going to get back on track because I too prepared a few remarks, not sure how today was going to go. And I know we have one more meeting, but I think that's a quick one. And so I'm going to take the opportunity and I'm going to read this. So, Matt, for 17 years in the Northfield Public Schools, including the past 10 as superintendent, you have led with care, vision, steadiness, and heart. You have helped shape not only our schools, but the broader Northfield community, always keeping students, staff, families, and the future of public education at the center of your work. Northfield is stronger because of your leadership. Through change, challenge, growth, and opportunity, you've shown what it means to lead with integrity, transparency, and deep commitment to people. You have helped this district grow and thrive, and your impact will be felt for years to come. You often say, I appreciate you. Today, I'm going to say we, because I'm going to pretend like I involved all of the board in this. Today, we want to say it back to you. We appreciate you, Matt. We appreciate your dedication, your presence, your belief in this community, and the many ways you have invested in Northfield and its schools. Your leadership has made a lasting difference. Thank you for all you've given to Northfield. We are grateful for your years of service, proud of all you have accomplished, and excited for what lies ahead for you. We wish every success and every happiness in your next chapter.
Oi.
Ben said he'd be brief. I'll be actually brief. So I've shared many, I've shared many comments with Matt privately, and I will continue to do so. I just want to say this publicly: you have made me a better person for having you in my life, and this community is better for having you and Mary in it. So thank you for your 17 years of service, and look forward to your continued support in the years to come, because you're still going to live here.
Nice. Anybody else? Okay, Jeff.
Thank you for your continued friendship and your service to the district. A little thing about a comment, and maybe have you comment about your jobs within the district. I firmly do remember being on the board and hiring you for your first job, and if I'm right or wrong, was it an IT?
HR.
Okay, it was HR, and I think there were like 28 applicants or something. So we talked about it, and you came to the top, and you ended up getting that job. So appreciate you for all the things that you've done. But can you briefly talk a little bit about the jobs you've had in the district? And I'll leave it at that.
Maybe we should start with the jobs I haven't had, because that might be shorter. No, I was hired. I interviewed for the Director of Human Resources 17 years ago, just a couple of weeks ago. And Chris Richardson called and offered me the job. And I was actually nervous to be the district's lead negotiator. And I was struggling with that. And Chris said, don't worry about it. I'll teach you how to do it. And he did, right? It was great. And then I got on campus and Chris said, oh, I also need a director of technology. And I know you used to do that. Could you also do that too? I said, sure. So that was the job. 2 different jobs were posted, and I ended up doing both of them for a few years. And then we had some reorganization in the district office, and I became what was called the Director of Administrative Services. And so I oversaw all of the back office functions: finance, HR, child nutrition, technology. And we worked with great people like Val Murdestorff and Molly Bieselman, who became the directors of their department. They were technical leads, and my job was to help develop their leadership and create coherence amongst all those departments. And that was a lot of fun. And then 10 years ago, I interviewed. I wish I would have interviewed for the superintendency multiple days, because I think I lost 12 pounds the day that I interviewed for that job with 3 different groups. And just will not ever forget Julie Pritchard, dear friend and mentor, calling me and offering me the job. And it was really a dream. And it's been a great time since. So that's the little recap, Jeff.
Nice. Okay, Maggie.
All right. Today I had the pleasure of attending the 5th grade graduation at Greenville Park, and during the video slideshow, there was a picture of you up there speaking to a group of 5th graders, and that reminded me that we moved to Northfield before my kids started school. Once they started, I realized, wow, this district is really amazing. The teachers are great, the principals are great. You see that at the graduation ceremonies. But it wasn't until I started watching school board meetings on YouTube that I realized that it was your leadership that was providing the vision and the care and really making all of the schools just really wonderful places for children. So thank you for that.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Ben, for opening that up, and everybody for giving comments. And I didn't prepare anything. I think for me, I just keep in mind that you're still around. We're still going to be connected. And I hope that I have express my appreciation along the way. That's something that you've been good about mentioning recently, to appreciate people now and not wait till later. But I don't have enough words to express my appreciation for you, for being a friend to me, for being a mentor, for believing in me. It's an incredible feeling to have you next to me and to have you believing in me, and even when I don't believe that I can do it, you're there. And I remember one of the things that you had said early on to me is that we will do this together and it'll be fun. And it's like, okay, I'm just gonna have to believe that, because
And it's almost always fun, yes.
yes, it is fun being a partner with you, Matt. I was a new parent in Northfield and got invited into a district committee meeting, and I had posted something on social media about how do I do X, Y, and Z, and somebody responded, and then pretty soon Matt, through Anita, connected with me and asked if I would participate in that communications committee, and I wrote them back, are you sure you're asking me to do that? Are you? And yes, and always been very welcomed by you. That was my first time that you welcomed me, and you continue to do that every day. Actually, you welcome me and lift me up. So thank you so much for being a part of my life and helping me grow and be a better leader, just as others have expressed. Well, keep appreciating you.
You're all welcome. I really appreciate all those comments, and thank you. Very generous of all of you bringing artifacts. I do think it's important to tell people how you feel about them and how they've impacted you now, good or bad, in the moment. That prompt feedback we know is always good, and I think that we just sometimes miss those opportunities to tell people what they've meant to you. And so I've always tried to do that with all of you over the years and all of the people who've come before you. And I have loved every minute of this job, and I mean that. Like, it's the best job I've ever had. It's not even close. Now, some minutes I loved more than others, right? But it's been great, and I think about all the people that I had a chance to work alongside, all the great administrators and teachers and staff, and the students that we got to develop over the years and help them see the best versions of themselves, the families, the business community who's always supported us. This is the equivalent of Major League Baseball, right? Northfield Public Schools across the landscape of education. We have high expectations levied on us by the community and a high level of support. And I am genuinely grateful for every one of you at this table, and I have told you that. And I'll be telling that to you again in the next several weeks, both in person and in writing. And I'm also grateful to the other really, this board has been a model in my mind for the state from a governance perspective, from a support perspective, from a how we do things together perspective. That doesn't mean we always agree, right? But it means that we work together for the betterment of the community. I think of the other board members that sat at this table and supported me over the years. I just could not be more grateful for Julie Pritchard, right? Julie was just an amazing mentor, a great partner, and just forever grateful for her. Ellen Iverson, Rob Hardy, another great, we got him to come back one more time. Margaret Colangelo, who was on the board when I first started. Fritz Bogat, who was on the board in a temporary role when I first began. Robert Coleman, who stepped up. Tom Broniak, who's in the assembly tonight. And of course, Noel. Noel just had that way of correcting us and cheerleading us, right, when we needed him. So we honor Noel's memory tonight, too. And, a lot of people have said the superintendency is a lonely job, but I've never felt that way, not once, because you've got a board who just supports you and who really focuses on, our commitment to students intentionally through the strategic plan. So I just really appreciate the opportunity that I've had here, and I'm so excited for Dr. Anderson. He is taking this really sacred trust, and we're ready for another acceleration. So thank you to all of you, and we have business to do tonight too, but this was delightful. Thank you very much, and I just appreciate all of you.
Okay, item 5 is our items for discussion and reports, and we start off with Superintendent Focus Areas final report.
Yeah, so in the packet, I included a final report on the focus areas that were set for this year, and my advice moving forward would be when the superintendent wants to set 5 areas, tell them 3, right? Because there's always that dilemma at this board table each year. We should really know set more than 3 or 4, and we always end up setting more because we're energized by it. But I'm going to leave the report stand at this point. What I did is I highlighted each of the focus areas. I gave an update. We made progress in each area. I'm not going to say that each area is perfectly complete, right? Some of these goals from time to time would go over 2 years. I do want to highlight one that we had as a 2-year goal about the work-based learning seminar experience course. That is scheduled to go next year, and we've got a teacher, we've got summer hours ready to go. So I think that we're in the right direction there. I think the AI Academy was interesting, right? I've taught a lot of those kind of academies over the years, and this was one of the few that I had to really think in between sessions as to what we were going to do the next time based upon what people were learning, because it's such a nascent field. So those are a couple of the ones that I would highlight, and certainly take any questions, and listed all the pieces that we had there along with those focus areas, and then a list of other items. And in the table file I included, I had forgotten to include that policy challenge that we did this year, and that was an idea that we had about how do we help our staff understand policy more. And we had 26 policy challenges, try to make it in a fun and engaging way. And so I just highlight that as an example of how we're always trying to improve how we did things with people and try to make something that is pretty dry fun. So I'll certainly stand for any questions or any feedback on the report.
Thank you for putting that together and especially for doing the work on it. Board members, do you have any questions on the report at this time? Amy.
It's not really a question. First, I have to say I'm very impressed by the amount of work that you did this year on top of everything else that was going on. This is a lot, and thank you for the thorough listing of it all. And I also have memories of those discussions about how many goals to have. And I think there was a lot of board encouragement to stick with like 3 or 4, but your enthusiasm for so many different areas wouldn't stop you. So just know that about yourself, that you have lots of vision and lots of plans. And thank you for all of this.
Anyone else? Okay, item B is our legislative wrap-up, and Dr. Hillman will provide that update for us.
Yeah, so in the board packet, I included the MASA legislative session, end of session update. And so I know board members can certainly read through that update. I'm sure you've also read the MSBA update. There's just a couple of things that I would want to highlight in that report. Limited funding this year. Really, I mean, I think there's more that happened than what maybe a lot of people would think from the outside, but there was pretty limited funding, a total one-time amount of $31.7 million, and it was across lots of different budget areas and bills. I do want to highlight the compensatory revenue solely because this is a topic that is being debated across the state. So you will hear that when it comes to compensatory revenue with the new formula, the new approach, there were some people would perceive it as winners and losers, but we're right about the same. So we're a unique district that regardless of the way that we're going to have about the same amount of money in compensatory funding next year as we did last year, even with the hold harmless. So we're a district where it really was a push for us. It wasn't something we were going to gain or lose. And of course, your compensatory funding is really based upon your free and reduced price lunch count at site level schools. And so, again, you'll hear about that as a big topic in so many other districts. It was really a non-factor for us in terms of our budget. I also want to highlight the requirement that will go into effect on July 1, 2028 for schools to have anonymous threat reporting systems. And I'm proud to share with you that we are ahead of that game already. We just signed a memorandum of understanding the other day with the Sandy Hook Promise for their program that's called See Something, Say Something, and that's a 24-hour threat assessment piece. And so Justin Robley and the team here will be continuing to move that forward, and we know that that is one of the programs that meets the state criteria. One little nugget that I think is going to be a real help for schools down the line is that the legislature did authorize the use of operating capital revenue to pay utility bills. And most people would read that and glaze over their eyes. And what I would say is that is actually a pretty big deal because we've asked for flexibility in the current funding. So a district that can transfer that, I mean, that's a significant amount of money for us. And so if we are at a point where we needed to relieve the general fund and the operating capital fund would allow it, we'd be able to mix and match. We've done that with a few things that were eligible for that over the years. But I do think that's a bigger deal than a lot of people think because, again, it is a way to relieve the general fund without having to go back to taxpayers. And so it just allows you to more efficiently use the dollars that you have depending on your district circumstance. I'm really pleased with that. There were some technical adjustments with the READ Act. You're going to see this probably for another biennium where the READ Act was massive legislation, and then as it's being implemented, they realize, oh, there's a few things that need to be adjusted each year. I do also want to highlight that there's two other pieces I want to highlight. The next one is something that you're going to hear about because of training related to something that's called the grooming bill. And so essentially, this is a bill that was created that would make it a felony offense, and it applies to adults who express sexual intent toward a child and deliberately build a false trusting relationship to manipulate that child toward future sexual conduct, even if no sexual contact ever occurs. And so there was some real emotional testimony at the legislature just about as people looked back about how some of these things had occurred over the years. There's also some other reporting for police to have to report to certain licensing agencies around it. There's going to be some required additional mandated reporter training. This is going to go into effect in 2026, August 1st, and for any offenses that happen after that. But this is going to be a thing that's going to be required training, very emotional circumstance, and so it just codifies this as part of state law and what can become a felony. We're still learning. Once a law like this is passed, you learn what does that actually mean from MDE. It's not the most pleasant topic to talk about, but it was one of the few standalone bills that were passed at the legislature. And then finally, I just want to highlight something that I think is going to be really important for us all to make sure that we talk with our communities across the state about, which is the constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot this fall to reform what's called the permanent school fund. So when you go all the way back to the beginning of the state, the formation of the state, 2.5 million acres of land were put into trust. And districts essentially, since the founding of the state, have been eligible for up to 2.5% of the proceeds of the dividends, if you will, from those lands. And it's stayed the same ever since. And so what the constitutional amendment will allow is for that percentage to go from 2.5% to 4.5%. But because it's part of the state constitution, the voters have to approve it at the polls. So we're going to basically run a statewide referendum campaign this fall. For Northfield, there's no tax implication. There's no additional taxes. But for Northfield, based on the projections that we've seen from MSBA, we'd stand to gain about $106,000. That's nothing to shake a stick at, right? And so, again, the current law does not allow it to go into the principal to be able to get to that 4.5%. This one would allow it to go into the principal. But we know that schools are struggling with declining enrollment. We know the state budget is in a difficult spot. And so this is one of those rare ways where schools could get some additional ongoing funds that do not cost taxpayers any money, and it would, coincidentally update the state constitution in this area, my understanding, for the first time since its founding. So those are the highlights of what I would give for the legislative report. Want to thank our legislative action committee. I think we met 8 times. We routinely got 8 to 16 or so people who showed up on Google Meet every other Saturday, and people who are really engaged, because democracy is not a spectator sport. And we even drew people from other districts. We had our first time weeks. We had a board member from New Prague join us who just they don't have that kind of legislative action committee, so they wanted to join and learn a little bit more about advocacy. So that's the end of session update. Those are just the things I selected to highlight this evening. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, board members? Okay, Ben.
No questions, but yeah, just when I used to work at the Department of Agriculture, I learned about that state fund, right, going back to kind of the founding of the state. And so turns out the State Department of Agriculture oversees part of that, not the work that I did, but the, so like state forest, for example, like state forest land and timber that's harvested off of that would be, one source of revenue or income that then gets turned back over to the Department of Education in the state for
Mineral rights, some other things like that too.
Yeah, so just a little interesting tidbit.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item C then, which is the proposed changes to the 26-27 Student Citizenship Handbook.
And it's a short report because there really are very few changes. Every year we ask principals and assistant principals, are there changes to the handbook that they'd like to see? And this year there weren't any substantial changes. In fact, no changes that they recommended. As you know, we've done a pretty heavy lift with this in the last few years, doing some reformatting and some really important work. We've had feedback from the public each year. We've offered people to come in and talk about the Student Citizenship Handbook in between the time the board heard it and the time that it was approved. We think we've got it in a fairly good spot right now. There are a couple of minor things in terms of one that's not minor, but is the changing of another outstanding district employee who's retiring here this week, Molly Wieselman, our Director of Human Resources. She also serves as the Title IX Coordinator and the Human Rights Officer. We put that name in the Student Citizenship Handbook so parents can, if they have a complaint, they know exactly who to go to. So Noella O'Rourke, should you approve the consent agenda, will be our next Director of Human Resources. This would, in the table file, you've got the version that would change her name, and I think those were really, there was one statute that was miscoded, and so, but nothing in terms of the actual policy itself. And as a reminder to people watching, the Student Citizenship Handbook serves as our discipline policy, and it really guides administrators in what are the consequences that they provide for behavior that goes awry against the Student Citizenship Handbook. Be happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. Any questions at this time? All right, very good. Moving right along then to our consent agenda. And as a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Jeff, did you want to pull something or do you want to make a motion?
No, I want to do something. Items for individual.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
Motion.
Thank you, Maggie. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Ben. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. We're on to item 7, our items for individual action. And we have 4 items tonight. First, first I'd like to take a motion, and then we have a discussion, and then we move to a vote. Is there a motion to approve the resolution certifying the population estimate for the 26 payable 27 levy of Independent School District number 659 as presented?
I move.
Thank you, Corey. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, now I'll open up for discussion.
I'd like Val just to talk a little bit about this because it's something we haven't done. We've done it a couple of years ago, but I think it's important for people to know why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So the population census is one of the data points for the community education levy for part of their levy revenue generation. And so that is based on the census, which only happens every 10 years. So this process allows us to update that should it increase. And that just allows an additional amount of revenue to be generated for community education. In this case, it's, I think, a couple hundred in terms of the population. And I anticipate that probably is just a couple $1,000s. But as you know, we are leaving no stone unturned, and we will take all the extra pennies. So that is what this is for.
Okay, thank you. Did you want anything, Dr. Hellman? All right, questions or comments? Okay, this is a resolution, so Kelly, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez George.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Item B is the audit engagement letter. Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 audit engagement letter from Clifton Larson Allen LLP?
Motion.
Thank you, Jenny. There's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so the board is requested to approve the enclosed audit engagement letter for the audit year 25-26. The engagement letter establishes the parameters and fees associated with the annual audit required by statute. Dr. Hillman or Val, would you like to make any comments?
Happy to do so. As you know, we have used Clifton Larson Allen for several years. This engagement letter is very similar to prior years, mostly with just a slight increase in the fees as expected.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Right, then we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Item C, the board is requested to approve the agreement between the City of Northfield and Northfield Public Schools for the lease of the city's ice arena at the May 13th, 2024 meeting. Did I get the date right?
Yep.
the board approved a letter affirming the district's commitment to leasing the ice arena for up to a maximum of $250,000 annually, including ice time, for an estimated 20 years. The district will use its lease levy authority to fund the annual payment. Is there a motion to approve the agreement between the City of Northfield and Northfield Public Schools for the lease of the city's ice arena?
Motion.
Thank you, Maggie. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Are there any questions, any comments? Dr. Helen, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I do want to just point out that the lease that is in the table file had just a couple of minor changes since the last time that you saw this draft. And I just want to point out that in section 4, we changed the payment date to July 15th. We had originally proposed looking at something by June 30th at the end of the fiscal year. The city has asked if we can do that earlier. It needs to be in our new fiscal year, but we need to have enough time to cut the check. And their payment will be due in August of each year. And so we'd make that $200,000 payment each year in July. I want to point out that the board did approve the funding for this in the budget this year. And then remember, moving ahead, we will pay for it with our lease levy reimbursement. That's 1 year in arrears. So I just want to point out the payment part there. We also want to just say we did clean up a little bit the language in section 5 that eliminated a little bit of redundancy. It clarified the $250,000 cap and ensuring, just making it really clear that we get that 300 hours of ice time, even if the ice time amount were to go over the cap, or the ice time payment were to go over the cap. And then we did amend or just modify it addendum C, rather than, because the city has a different fiscal year than we do, and so there was a payment year, and we felt that was confusing, so we just made it the payment date of July 15th each year just to clarify it. So I just am really grateful that we're moving this forward. I know this has been a long time coming. We've been a partner at the table with this for a long time. Some board members got the chance to tour the new facility, and I know it's just going to be a really great place for kids to participate in ice-related sports, and it's going to be something that the community can really be proud of. And we're happy to have been a partner alongside, the city of Dundas and the Northfield Hockey Association. So really, this is a great example of intergovernmental work and also working with private entities within the community. So again, we adopted that letter in 2024 saying we'd be part of it. Then we had it as part of the budget for this year, and this is just the final technical details of putting it. The city council will have to approve this as well. So we're approving it first, and then it will go to the city council.
Good, thank you for that. Board members, do you have any questions, any comments? All right, then we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Our final item for items for individual action is item D, Policy Committee Recommendations. I will take a motion first and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the Policy Committee's recommended changes to the following policies: 203, 209, 410, 442, 503, 509, 530, 532, 533, 535, 540, 560, 655, and 701.
Moved.
Thank you, Corey.
Hang on a
Is there
second.
a second?
I didn't get a chance to, I wanted to make a
So
motion.
now we'll open it up for discussion.
Yeah,
Did you
but I
have a question
I
or
wanted to make a motion before you started that.
we can discuss it, and then if the motion doesn't fit what you are hoping for, Jeff, then at that time we can amend it or change it. So let us discuss the policies, and then I will ask you to make an amended motion. Did you want to open the discussion, Jeff?
Well, no, the motion I was going to make is to leave 11 of the 13 policies stand, but pull 203 and 209 for discussion.
Okay, well, we can discuss now.
Yeah.
Would you like to open the discussion?
No, I just wanted Matt to comment on 203 and 209.
Yeah, so 203 and 209 are items that we discussed, I would say, quite a bit at the last meeting. First of all, 203 is the bylaws of the board, and the addition that was made, and there was a modest change made since the last meeting based on the comments that Claudia made at the last meeting, and then some adaptation there. You'll see that it's under the duties of the chair in 203, where it gives the chair the responsibility to look into, I'm just getting to the point here where I've got the So the section that it was in 1I was under letter I for the chair. And that says to facilitate informal resolution of potential policy violations by board members as outlined in 209, facilitate investigations into alleged policy violations by board members as necessary in accordance with 209. The previous language simply said that the board would investigate allegations, but really, when you look at policy 209, an investigation isn't the default, right? There's a number of other ways that you would use before you got to it. So this clarifies what the chair's role is. And in 209, again, the biggest piece that we talked about the last time was this concept of having a board procedure for addressing any policy violations. And I think that we made it really clear, at the last meeting, there isn't concern about this board. We haven't any concern about any board that we've had here, but we've seen more boards than should have across the country really devolve on some allegations amongst the board or against board members for violating board policies or other kinds of things. And when you've watched those boards struggle, they've struggled with, we don't have a procedure to basically govern or police ourselves, if you will. And so you see that can be a really hard piece for boards to get past. So the concept that had come forward was, do we put into policy 209 a way in which we can have a systematic procedure for walking through that? I want to be really clear. I don't think there's going to be a need for it that I can see, but it does give future boards that piece that if there was something that came as a policy violation by a board member or an allegation, rather than trying to figure out what are the steps that we walk through, there's a set of steps that we go through. And I think if you look at it to begin with, it's essentially a set of ways that no matter who it is, no matter how it goes, there's a similar procedure to treat similarly situated people similarly. And the first piece, of course, is we tell everyone, if you've got a concern with someone else, try to figure it out yourself, right? The first step are for people, either whether it be a stakeholder or members of the board, to have a good faith effort to resolve what the alleged policy violation would be. Many times it might be something that someone didn't even know they were doing. And so giving the person the chance to correct that on their own. If that can't happen, then you move to having the board chair. Part of the board chair's responsibility is to lead the board. And so we did do a couple of modifications just in how the board chair had the opportunity to make sure they governed that process. So if it's not resolved through informal means, then you have to provide that in writing. And then the board chair tries to readily resolve it. So I think of this as almost a mediation kind of piece where the board chair gets with the affected parties and say, okay, let's get it on the table. What is the concern? And the board chair tries to help resolve the issue between two people. If that doesn't work, right, then the board chair, at this point, this is the changed language since the last time, the board chair is empowered to say, yes, I believe this has been resolved or not. And there's a number of ways that you could do that. And if members of the board don't like how the board chair brought that to resolution, the next election, they can vote not to renew the board chair, right? That's within one calendar year. And so, because I do think that's another argument that the ultimate accountability for a school board member who is violating policy or creating an issue would be the voters at the next election. But for some people, that could be quite a distance. And so this way, if people don't like how the board chair handled it, they can choose a different board chair the next time around. So that's a safeguard that we made a change since the last meeting. And so again, the board chair tries to bring it to resolution. If the board chair can't bring it to resolution, then it comes to the full board for determination. And then that is where there's the investigation. That's where the person if there's an allegation against, they have an opportunity to be able to say, their perspective and what their side of the story is, if you will. And then it lists what the potential sanctions are. Of course, state statute for a long time has had the ability to remove a board member, very rarely used in Minnesota, but there was nothing between nothing and kick you off the board, right? And so this provides just a series of pieces where the board in itself, frankly, most of them are really mostly public scolding, right? It's, when you think about censure or a warning, these things carry no tangible, specific consequences, but it is the board saying, nope, this behavior was not okay, and this is how we are putting it. There's several options at the board. There are circumstances where the board could choose to reduce a member's compensation for the violation, but again, this gives a suite of options for the board. Again, want to be really clear, I'm not worried about this with this board. I don't think anybody's worried about it, but as my mother-in-law always used to say, it's better to have the winter emergency kit in your car, because then you won't need it, right? As opposed to not having it in your car and need it. So, Jeff, I hope that answers your question just about thinking about, just those were the couple of changes since the last time we did discuss this at the last meeting. It is just to give the board a set of tools should there be some kind of issue either between board members related to policy or even related to the community.
Thanks for the clarification.
Is that? Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, Amy and then Jenny.
This is just a comment. I do appreciate how there's sort of outlines possibilities of doing things in a non-public fashion, because I think once you bring it into a public meeting, that is like firing the cannons, you know? So it's just better to have all of those options ahead of time and have various steps due to the severity. Having been someone that has been spoken to a couple times myself in my early years, I appreciate the chance to do it that way.
Great, thank you. Good comment. Jenny.
I do have a question for Dr. Hillman regarding the 209 policy revision. So seeing as you, in maybe less than a month or so, you will be overseeing the MSBA policy department, what is the reason that the MSBA does not have this in their model policy?
Yeah, so just to be really clear to begin with, I won't be overseeing the MSBA model policy. Dr. Terry Morrow from MSBA does that. MASA, where I'll be the executive director, we're in partnership, and we do support, and it is an MSBA, MASA policy handbook, but Dr. Morrow is the lead on this. And I think you raise a good question, and I think I am curious sometimes, so I'm gonna use the example of AI, right? This board had talked a little bit about, do we move forward with an AI policy a few years ago? And our choice was, we didn't feel we were ready to go to a holistic AI policy. We chose to go in specific areas. You probably can look at this in the same way too. Now MSBA, they also didn't have an AI policy. Now they have one, right, that you'll be looking at this summer. But I think sometimes MSBA continues to work through those pieces, and sometimes boards choose to move ahead in terms of including those kinds of things before there's a statewide model policy. I don't know the answer, Jenny, whether or not this will come forward. I do know that sadly, there are more than there should be boards in the state where they are having these difficulties. And so I would be hopeful that, MSBA does a lot of behind the scenes work for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if something like this or a flavor of this would come forward from MSBA in the future. I just haven't seen it as of yet. You hope that, whatever it is right now cycles itself out. But I think that you've seen enough places where we felt it was just better to try to get ahead of this. And I do think it's a good tool for districts to have. Maybe this isn't maybe there's another iteration of this, Jenny, that is refined as time goes along. But we looked at the districts that do have this policy, and then we really tried to say what seems reasonable for the board, the tools to have. But I can't tell you whether or not MSBA will add it as a one yet or not. I don't think it's been a completely pervasive thing right across the state to the point where and I think they'd have to be very thoughtful about a statewide, how they would implement such a statewide piece to match the needs of all districts.
I would say that one of the reasons that MSBA most likely is not going to implement this is because just recently, and this is what just totally made me do a deep dive just in the last week or so into this policy, is because the Rock Ridge School District here in Minnesota, there was a lawsuit filed by a school board for Policy 209, or regarding Policy 209, and the circuit court just very recently ruled in favor of that board member, although it's been in litigation since 2023. So that school district has had to pay out, well, they shouldn't have had to pay out anything because their policy should have not been so loose. And by us, and as I look through this, I'm thinking, well, maybe ours is better, but I see a lot of gaps in here, and it makes me really nervous that we too would be put in that position and that our general fund would then be vulnerable to that type of litigation, lawsuit, defending the district. I mean, we have been in litigation before and have had to pay out, and a lot of times that can be prevented by having tighter policies. And I see a lot of gaps in here. And so I can just start by asking a few questions, I guess, that kind of show how wide those gaps really are. And because I think that's just an invitation for that litigation. I mean the more airtight that your policies are, of course, I think attorneys will really hesitate a lot more in going forward with anything like that. And so I would like to see this revised. Otherwise, I would not be able to vote yes to support this policy tonight. But one question that I wanted to ask is that one of the factors that brought that particular case into a lawsuit was because the board stated, that the board member violated the code of ethics, which is exactly what we have here. Unfortunately, it said that it's just not supported enough. Those they're very loose. And as I'm looking at ours, I see that they're also kind of loose. I mean, the duties and obligations as a board member, just for the most simple, probably example would be, to attend board meetings. Well, maybe that should be more concise to say, board members will attend, at a minimum of 75% of board meetings, or I'm not really even sure what that would be. But that's just one example, I would say, where you'd want to be as concise as possible, because if you're going to point to, if you're going to use that to censure or provide some other consequences to board members, that's really, like I said, you should have everything really concise, rules and duties and obligations. But one thing I did look at, because I wanted to see what MSBA had, and I noticed that they do have a red line. MSBA has a red line on this 209 Code of Ethics policy. And they state that it's really 209 is to prioritize board members' obligations and as a written set of expectations. So to me, that's not really like rules with punishments, rather just that then the kind of the natural consequences of not living up to those expectations would kind of be the consequence. You'd kind of be a failure at that point. And that I really see that method as a better method, because it kind of it safeguards the district as well. And then MSBA also says in the red line that 209 should be just a starting point for boards as they create the code that establishes parameters for board member conduct. So really what we have now is basically we just took it from MSBA, which is fine, like I said, but as long as we use that as what they say, a written set of expectations, not rules to use as then going to and saying, well, this is why the board member can be censured, or, this is why we can use these punishments here because they violated this. Well, if they're just guidelines and a starting point, I think we really need to provide more concise areas there, as MSBA is kind of recommending, establish better parameters so that everyone can understand, and it's not as easy to just say, well, the factor is that, they're being censured because they violated this policy or that policy, item I. Well, like I said, if item I isn't concise, that just opens us up to be vulnerable. So that's one area that I wanted to ask you about, and what you think after reading or hearing from the red line.
Yeah, I would agree that all of the MSBA, first of all, thank you for that analysis. I appreciate the thought that was put into it. And I think that I totally agree that the red line is a starting point, right? And so it's one of the reasons that we have all of our policies on I think it's a 4-year cycle now, Kelly, that we look at them at least every 4 years. So, that part of the portion that you're talking about tightening up, my understanding is that code of ethics at the beginning that's been there for some time, right? And the board has reviewed that since we adopted it in 2004, and then we have updated it. It looks like 4 times since 2019. So I think that I think it's good to look at something through a new lens, right? Because we're talking about a potential consequence for that. So I think that that's always good to say, is the listing that we have there that's been looked at by multiple policy committees and approved by the board several times still the appropriate list of ethics? And that certainly is what the board should debate. The board can debate those kinds of things. So we weren't looking at the policy this time from that lens because we had updated it several times. We were looking more at this other, I would call, conflict resolution. And I would also say that some other districts who have adopted something like this, they don't have it in 209, right? Sometimes it's a standalone policy. And when we looked at it, as we considered having it as a standalone policy, which the board could certainly consider saying, put it back to a standalone policy, because obviously the investigation and the code, not solely about the code of ethics, right? It's about, any of the district policy that we would have. We put it in there just so that we didn't have more than one policy, if that makes sense. We tried to embed it in the one that seemed to make the most sense to us. But there's a fair point that, some of the other districts who've adopted a policy similar to that portion that we're adding, that they have put it as a standalone policy. So to be clear, it wasn't directly about the standard code of it. It just felt like the right place to put the sanctions. And I think there's two different debates, right? There's the part about, is the code of ethics that we have adopted as a board, is that the right set of code of ethics for you? Or is there a greater level? What I'm hearing you say is there greater specificity, because you're saying attend board meetings, that is more of a general statement. And if someone is going to be held accountable for it, I hear you saying we should really put a number on it, right? Or something that makes it more clear as to what is the violation versus not.
I think that all of the duties and obligations in code of ethics portion, as it stood, was excellent. I don't think anything needs to change on there. It was only when you add part 3 here, when you're now trying to address, punishments and consequences. Now, when you introduce that changes everything, and now you have an obligation to go back into that first part of the ethics and obligations and look at that and say, is this concise enough to now offer these punishments without a court saying, no, it's too vague, this is not going to work, that's wrongdoing. And I'm just saying that it's leaving us vulnerable for all of that, and I don't want to see our district get into that mess. And all it would really take is, like I said, so either leave it as it was, I guess, which I'm not exactly for that. I mean, I would like to see a change too. But if you want to address that part 3 and add the sanctions, I'm all for it. But then you should have the obligation, like I said, to go back and start, tightening up the obligations and duties and ethics, so that it would stand up more in a court, because as I point to that other case, that set precedent now. And so we have really no excuse, to say, well, we didn't know that's what could happen. Well, we do know it can happen.
Yeah, and I haven't read the Rockridge policy, so I don't know, did they include this kind of consequence, or were they doing it on their own? I just don't know enough about that.
Sanctions were included.
Okay.
But
It was
like I said, they
included in the
just
policy?
kept, yes, and they
Okay.
just kept sort of the obligations and ethics as we did similarly, because it's also similar to MSBA's. But like I said, MSBA does not contain the sanction and the consequence
correct.
area.
Right.
So something tells me that if MSBA were ever to include that, they would also understand what the court would say, and they would also go in and change then some of those duties and obligations and code of ethics.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I don't know enough about that Rockridge case yet to, be able to comment on what the conditions of that case were. And, is it a 1-for-1, with what we've proposed? I don't know the answer to that, so that's something the board should certainly consider as they determine how to move forward. Would it make you more comfortable if that part 3 was removed and put as a standalone policy? Because part of what I'm hearing is that the inclusion in the ethics piece changes the way that you look at that portion of it. If it was separated as its own policy, does that change it for you?
But then when you separate it, it still goes back, it can still go back to point to the sanctions. We're going to implement the sanctions due to violating policy 209, code of ethics, or whatever it is. So then that wouldn't change. That would still, and then if you don't change the code of ethics or the obligations and duties to become more concise and tighter, then you're going to have the same issue.
Ask a
Who else
question.
would like to make comments? And then I'll line you up. So Amy, who else wanted to make a comment about it?
I will, but you can go
Okay,
first.
Ben and then Jeff. Okay, so Amy.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and it seems like this would be a good policy to continue to look at. the big question for me, is this a step forward at this point where it's an improvement, and can we continue to improve, continuous improvement? The other thought I had was, with a lot of the other policies, we have a separate procedures document. And could that procedures section be part of the procedures document? And would there be any advantage to that? Because that's a less formal thing. And I'm just saying, maybe we have a stopgap measure until we have a chance to look through this. And I think it's good to have some clarity as to how many meetings. If you attend one meeting a year, are you attending enough? So more specific guidelines would be helpful. I agree with that. But what are our options here as far as where we can put the procedures, and how can we move forward and make things improve what we can now, and then line it up to look at it again next year?
Yeah, I mean, we typically, so procedures are often, and the board could certainly choose to do that, right? Procedures typically, if you think about most policies, it is a document that accompanies a policy that is typically administrative procedure, right? So it is administrators put together the procedures of how we implement the policy. Procedures, most procedures, there are a few, but that have to be approved by the board, but very few, right? Most of it is, this is our plan for how we implement this policy. Since this is a board responsibility and not administrative responsibility, that's the dilemma that I think you think through, right? Is that, in my mind, the procedures would still be at that same level of the policy, because the board is the one that is doing the work amongst itself. It's not an administrator, who is implementing the board's policy through a set of procedures. So I think that, to me, this one could be a potato, right? I mean, if you put together a set of procedures, they're still done by the board, right, to be able to, conduct an investigation or a problem-solving piece with itself. Now, the truth is that you could certainly separate it as a set of procedures. It would basically do this, in my mind, and I certainly would welcome other opinions. In my mind, it would do the same as it would for if you put it into a separate policy, right? I mean, if you say we want it out of this policy itself, it may make more sense just to make it its own standalone policy.
But it would still be a policy.
It would still be a policy, yes. Because the administrators should not be involved, in my mind. The administrators should not be involved in this. I'm using the policing of the board itself, right? That's not an appropriate role for administrators. That's for the board to do, and only the board can set policy, and only the board can. So that's where I think it's. I could use a ton of different 6 of one, half dozen of another. Whichever analogy you'd like today.
Ben?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I think it's a good call out, right? This is the board's document. It's not the superintendent's, and the superintendent doesn't have any role in it. So, well, I appreciate the perspective. You don't have to worry about it in some ways. So, I think as a board, and I was one of the board members who said, let's look at this. And I don't know that we would be having this conversation around the language that we've had since 2004 in some flavor or way, unless we sort of tack on that last piece, right? And I think it's the last piece that sets up a process by which the board is able to hold all of its members accountable. And that's clear and it's fair. And I think, Jenny, to the point you raised in terms of like, well, we're not getting specific enough. That language has existed, and that was and is the language that we look at to say, how will I comport myself as a member of this board? And we could get more specific, but I also feel like, that level of specificity sometimes creates its own problems, in terms of like, 75% attendance. Well, then does that count routine board meetings, or is that special board meetings too, or whatever? So this is a little bit of, it when you see it to some extent in terms of behavior and sort of what goes outside the norms and the acceptable norms of a governing body and a board. And to me, the value is that it sets up a process for the chair and for the rest of the board to say, okay, what do we do when that happens? Do we have a process in place? And you can say it's a process or it's a policy. I think we're sort of mincing words at that point. We're just saying, here's the rules, right? Here's the way that we're going to handle something like this. And to me, there's a benefit in that, because otherwise, before we just had nothing, or you get kicked off the board. And that's a pretty sharp dichotomy in terms of the outcomes depending on what it is that we're talking about here. So I think, you know, if there's discomfort in this language, I would ask why, and then take a step back and say, does this help us meet our self-governing process, right? Does this give us a set of rules that we're comfortable and say, yeah, that seems reasonable in terms of a graduated approach, depending on whatever the issue is. And again, the best time for me, to think about passing something like this is not when you need it, right? And that may be why a lot of boards don't do it, is because they're already in a space of conflict. They're like, well, I'm not going to do that because then you're just going to use that against me. So, I think we're in a unique position here to say, plan for the future, break glass in case of emergency, but here we have a process that we can go to, should the unfortunate happen. So that's my perspective, and I'm comfortable with the motion on the table to vote and approve all of these policies as written.
Thank you, Ben. Jeff, and then Corey, you had comments also? I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I would say just based on the discussion, I mean, what's in there and what it stands, it just sounds too wishy-washy and not enough teeth in there for the taking out the, it sounds like you're close, but I mean, as it stands, I would, like an option to vote no on 209 or else make a motion to table it for further discussion later, unless you can come up with a rewrite that's acceptable tonight. I don't know. So more discussion on that, I guess I'm looking at.
Okay, Corey?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Ben said. I think you made a lot of salient points. This policy is about the future. It's not necessarily about today. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure we set good policy when necessary to help protect the district in the future, both from a board perspective and an administrative perspective. I've watched a number of school boards the last several years through the luxury of the internet and have seen some good things and some bad things where a policy of this type has come forward as a result of some of the relationships. And I've also seen, for those who attended the MSBA conference in January, there was a board member, I think from Elk River, who's now the chair, who had been previously censured and had to learn through, and they learned the policy. So it's meant to be a tool to help navigate board relations, because we all get elected. We all have different perspectives and behaviors and beliefs, and we have to work together as a group, which we do here well, which is great. We don't know what a board might look like in 12 years. So I think it's about protecting the district and protecting the board and helping self-govern each other and just having a little more meat to it. To some of Jenny's comments, I think, about specificity, a number of these pieces are tied to state statute. So like the dates, absenteeism. Statute says 90 days. So is that committee? Is that school board? So I think there is some latitude in the conversation. So the board, the 7 members or the chair can lead those conversations and try to, hey, you've been missing some meetings. What's going on? So I look at this as that middle ground from nothing to kicking people off. And state statute, which this is founded in, has a number of cases about when it's appropriate to do certain things. And this just gives us some tools to help address those. And I think, as Dr. Hillman said, a lot of these are basically verbal warnings in most cases. There clearly are a couple more that are beyond that, but the point is, by having that graduation that Ben alluded to, can hopefully mitigate getting to that point. So I'm comfortable with the language it is currently, looking at where it is currently, but I understand wanting to look at it further. So, instead of waiting 3 or 4 years, maybe when Dr. Anderson comes on, we can revisit and see what his experience has been in other districts. But I'm okay with moving ahead with it tonight.
Jenny, I know you want to make some more comments. I'm going to have Maggie speak. I want to give some comments, and then we'll throw it back to you.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify that this policy 209 is already in place without this section, right? So if people are listening and are confused, we're not saying that we're going to adopt this policy brand new tonight or not. I also think that we have this policy in place now, and if someone were to violate some of this policy, we probably could follow some of this procedure, and there's nothing stopping this procedure from just happening kind of ad hoc right now anyway. That said, I worry a bit about adding overly specific requirements. Because I think that then you get into situations where it might force the process, or might force a censure or something when we don't actually want to do that. So all of those things said, I would be comfortable tabling 209 for now, or rather the updates to it, and getting some more feedback from MSBA or from our lawyer about whether there are concerns with opening ourselves up for a future challenge, given that we are adding a significant portion to this policy, and that it is, really the only one that would direct our operations in a way that's maybe different from what is in statute. So, like I said, policy 209 I support, but I also think that it's okay if we take some more time to make it right.
Thank you, and I appreciate you saying that part about we are only talking about updates to 209, so thanks for putting us there. So I have a couple comments that I wanted to make. One is that I appreciate the checks and balances that are in this new update, and I did connect with Dr. Hellman on some of that wording, just as I saw it through my perspective, and so board members were given a chance to look at the updates to the update. And so where I wanted to say is that in item D, in section 3, and the last sentence there, that gives me a lot of comfort as a board member or acting as the chair. The board chair or the vice chair, if the allegations are against the board chair, shall determine whether the issue has been readily resolved or requires consideration by the full board. And so, as Dr. Hemming was pointing out in his opening comments, that responsibility to take care of the reputation of our board and take care of the individual board member who somebody has brought an allegation to, and it could be anything. And so, as you were saying, Jenny, it could be that somebody says, certain board member hasn't attended enough board meetings, and you have that face-to-face meeting and you connect with the parties, and as Matt was calling it, a mediation. There's a lot of safety in that, in the relationships and the process and the protection of the reputation of all the parties involved, the board as a whole, but then also the individuals involved. And so I like that there's a checks and balance there, that it's not just going to automatically go to the board, be public, and then hear the board members discuss something that could be any range of issues. And then finally, if it does come to the full board, we don't have to sanction. So there is a discussion in public, which is whatever, it is what that is, a discussion in public. But the board is the one, not the chair, who decides on how to move forward with that allegation that a policy has been violated. So that also gives me a lot of relief to know that it's not up to the chair to sanction, and the board has the ability to say, okay, we heard, and we are not interested in implementing any sanctions. Okay, so I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, thank you. All of that was really interesting. And I agree that it's really tough for me to have rules and not have an accountability section. Just ask my kids. We have plenty of accountability and consequences. And so I like that. And so that's not the part that I'm fighting here at all. In fact, I agree with almost everything everyone says. But I think that we're ignoring, like I said before, that gaping hole. And I mean, I guess I have to say it a second time, that our district, unfortunately, has been involved in lawsuits before, and we have paid out hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our general fund to settle several times. I mean, so at this point, how about now we be accountable and say, we have this precedent that just happened for 209, same exact policy, same situation, censure was performed, we have censure here. That makes me really nervous, and I can't support that because, like I said before, it makes us vulnerable, and I think we should learn from our mistakes. I'm not saying that any of us made a mistake for those previous policies at all, but at least now we can look at that and say, I don't want the district to go through that again. Let's make this as concise as possible. And I agree with other board members that, I wouldn't want to make those obligations and duties, really, really, as someone said before, that you don't want to go so far overboard and make them so tight that it just doesn't make any sense. And we're not about that, about, exhibiting those extreme rules. So I agree with that. But I just am trying to say that I'm not going to ignore the fact that it will make us vulnerable if there's already a precedent. And so I'm saying I can't say yes to that. And then in the future, just look the other way if there ever is, if we are ever challenged. I can't do that because, like I said, it's happening. I'm not going to ignore it. All the same factors were at play. I've studied it, and so I cannot vote yes to it as is. I would also be for tabling it and either for further discussion or further, I guess, information if our next superintendent would, wants to also bring us some additional information. If third parties want to bring us additional information, I would think that would be the smart way to go.
Okay, Ben and then Jeff.
Sorry, it's the beauty of having the internet, just doing a little Googling on that case. Like, I see, and I don't want to get into the finer points of that case, but what I see is that case was dismissed and no settlement was paid. So, regarding policy 209, so that's what the internet's telling me. But I don't think that we're speculating when we start to get into the space. We're getting speculative. We're saying, well, the current language is too vague, or the current language is too specific. The current language has served us. I think the one thing that's missing from the current language, to me, that's important, is that tie back to statute. So if you violate the code of ethics, like that could result in dismissal from the board, and that's captured in this new language that we have, in addition to some other things. So if we're talking about being clear in terms of expectations, now we're clear in the way that we're tying how to behave as a board member to some of the consequences of misbehavior. And I think, Claudia, as you talked about, there's a process that you go through, that the board goes through, that's, maybe public, maybe not public, depending on what the issue is at hand. So I'm a little surprised at the reluctance, frankly, from the board. Like, it sort of feels weird to me that, like, there's so much pushback against this, because, like, we're here, we function well, we're upright, the Upright Citizens Brigade, like, doing the right thing. So why are we worried about this? Like, that to me feels strange. So again, I'm going to say I'll support it because I think it's the right and ethical thing to do, and I'm not worried about consequences. I think this actually guards against that in a court. So again, I'm speculating, but that's how I feel.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jeff, then Matt. You wanna-
Myself or someone else possibly come up with a motion to table this, but I'm saying if in fact that did happen, to table or a suggested motion, I'm just wondering how long one would be looking at reasonable amount of time to table the issue.
I have a point of clarification. So the case that I was referring to was dismissed, but then the Court of Appeals had ruled in favor of the board member. So that is actually much worse, because now that public school district has had to defend itself and pay out. I wouldn't even want to imagine how much they've had to pay out now to represent not only in district court, but now throughout the Court of Appeals. Now they're going to have one more level to go through. So it's much worse, actually, knowing that it had to go through how many levels already.
Dr. Hellman?
Yeah, and just a couple of quick clarifications. I think that when you think about, first of all, I want to be clear, at least in my time here, I can't recall, I know we've had one legal proceeding, but nothing ever against the board. I want to be really clear that it's not been hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've paid out. But I do think you make a good point in terms of it's not just about any judgment, right? It is about the cost of the legal fees and representation. I think sometimes people think about a legal, because I was racking my brain to think, about lawsuits, and it's, because I would remember those, and I just, the board has never had one, and in the 17 years I've been here, I can only recall, I can recall one. Maybe there was more than that, but But the legal fees that you pay to defend the board, that is a very appropriate and fair perspective. And so I appreciate that coming forward. And I think that those are just the things that you need to consider in terms of, I think that some additional looking into the Rock Ridge suit, because I do think my latest understanding that is that, yes, the appeals court had directed it to go back, and then it was dismissed with prejudice, is my understanding, and that there wasn't a payout. And yet, the district did have to pay the attorneys to defend them or to represent them. So there is a cost, just to going through the legal proceedings, and that's something that we've thought about over the years. In terms of amount of time, Jeff, the amount of time is what you want, right? I mean, I'm really proud of this discussion. This is exactly why I'm not worried about it, because in terms of needing this sooner rather than later, because you are a thoughtful and deliberate board. You need to take the time that you feel is right. This is a policy that governs yourself. So Jeff, in terms of the timing, I think the timing can be as much or as little as you want, right? I think that one option would be to move it forward and ask the policy committee to bring it back another revision. I understand based on the conversation here, that would create some concerns, right? Because we don't want to move it forward until people are sure of that. What I would recommend is, I don't like tabling things because I think it becomes, I would recommend that if you're concerned about these two things, take them out, approve the policies that are on the table without those two. You don't even have to take another policy or another motion to not approve those policies. You just approve it and then send it back to the policy committee to look at it again. And I think that there's a real undercurrent here too, that I do think what we have had on this board forever is, I think Amy's absolutely right. Some of these steps have happened over the years, and they were less formal because that was the culture of the board, right? A more senior board member might take aside a board member who's newer and say, hey, let's just talk about how we do this here. And that would obviously be the ideal, right? And I think the question is, just in the way that we see society moving, if there becomes that possibility that it gets worse than that, that's where I think you're wise to consider it. But you have to be comfortable, number one, with what are conditions to create a violation, how it's handled, the procedures, and if you have concerns about opening the district to further concerns, that's absolutely should be one of the places that the board is, right? Making sure that you are protecting against all of those potential outcomes. There's a variety of ways you can do it. The length of time, I think, Jeff, it's as long as you want. It could be, you could say we'd like something back by August, right? The policy committee doesn't typically meet in the summer. You could say you want it for the fall. I suppose we could turn something around by the special meeting on the 24th if you wanted.
And Maggie, you want to make a comment, but I just want to say quick, are you on the policy committee, Maggie? And then Jeff and Amy, and so the policy committee brought the policy to us. So there is that level of the policy committee already wrestled with it, and this is what they brought us. And then it's the board's responsibility to look at that recommendation and continue to update it or approve it. Also, well, I'll let Maggie go, and then I'll make some other comments.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think the last thing I wanted to say was, because this is referring or this policy really relates to our own self-governance, I would be really uncomfortable if there were several board members concerned with it. And so I think taking a little bit more time to maybe verify that that this policy is, I don't want to say airtight, but maybe tighter than what has been seen. And I think because the 209 is already in place and we have all agreed to it, I would like to take more time just to make sure that everyone is okay with the additions to the policy.
Okay. The other comments I was going to make, and then if anybody else has more comments, we can go there or we can move to a vote. If and when the time comes that a conversation is had with ex-board member and it cannot be resolved, I cannot imagine a situation where the superintendent, the chair, the vice chair wouldn't at that point engage the lawyer to ask, the seriousness or the level of board involvement. Again, our policy would direct and exclude the superintendent as been described. I'm talking about the relationship piece of if something were to need to go to the board, that the lawyer would be available to even consult. And then, these policies are updated on a cycle too. And so there is a place for us to accept what the policy committee is recommending and then on its cycle continue to update it, seeing that we have very good relationships on this board and not in need of something immediately. So that's where I would sit with that. Any other comments? Okay, Jeff, and then Jenny, and then Amy. Jeff.
Again, on the motion, if I was going to motion something, I would motion probably 6 months or into the next year. But I'm just wanting more discussion on that. I do want to see a motion coming to, and I would like some help and suggestions on what that would look like, because it's getting kind of tricky, but I'll look for more discussion.
Okay, Jenny?
I'm going to shift a little bit, and I wanted to wait until everyone kind of had their chance to talk as much about the specifics about 209, and it sounds like everyone kind of got something in. If we did happen to take more time, whether it would be a week or 6 months, I guess, I too am on board with having that accountability, like I said before, and having it sooner rather than later. And it sounds like everyone else is really adamant about that too, and that's good. It means we're all, that's our common ground here. We want it. It's just how and when. So I did want to bring up one area that I looked at just to see if it was kind of a safeguard for now or if it's something that could be used. And we do have policy 103, concerns or complaints resolution, and I realize it really is not that comparable to this part 3 resolution area. However, it does have some similarities, such as I know paragraph C in the part 3, it talks about most issues can be solved through a conversation among those involved, as Claudia had mentioned, and I like that a lot. But that's also listed in policy 103. We have discussed the issue directly with the person. Most issues or problems can be solved by a conversation between those involved in it, which is very much similar to what Claudia was saying. And I do believe that that is the process I think that we're more about, really looking to that person-to-person level before we get, too formal. And so I'm also in agreement with everyone about that. I just wanted to mention that policy 103, though, because it absolutely can, and Matt, please correct me, but it can be used in the same fashion as what would have been part 3. It says, any community member or stakeholders can file a claim against a board member for violation of a policy. That can happen here within this policy too, and there is even the complaint for resolution process document so that it can be documented, which I love. I love things written. So then the reason I bring this up is because if we're worried that community members or staff or other school board members, that their voice won't be heard if something were to occur, as we've been seeing sometimes, that they have a process currently. It's not, probably the process that us board members would like to see for this particular situation with a board member violating a policy, but it's there nonetheless. And so if we do take some extra time in revising the 209, that there is a safeguard right now that people can have their voice heard, and it can be a written document for resolution.
I don't think 103 would apply very well. I think we'd have to tweak that as well.
That's what I mentioned. It's not ideal at all.
Yeah.
But it is there. Just, I just thought that I would bring that up. It's there. It's, like I said, it's not ideal. It's not something that we'd want to put forth as exactly what we want to use, but it's just there for people to for their voices to be heard.
And I'm just looking at the last item there, bring the issue to the chair. So we're back to policy 209. Any other comments at this point? Ben and Amy? Amy?
So I have a question for Dr. Hillman. Since this is a significant revision to 209, adding a whole nother section, did that get run by our attorney or by MSBA?
You know, we had some general conversations. We used another district's policy that we knew had been vetted by a legal firm. And we also had some discussions about a couple points of it in terms of having them completely review it because we had used previously reviewed language. We didn't pay them to specifically do that because there's also a payment every time we have the attorney review something. So that's certainly a step that we can do. We used pieces that we felt had been vetted already. That's very common to try to use other districts. If another district has done this already and they've used a similar firm, we try to reuse some of those things so that we don't always have to be the people that are paying for something. So I've not sent this to them and say, can you give me a red line, line by line? But we spoke with them about several of the components of it.
So where I stand now is I think that there is significant questions on the board about this policy, and that when it's a policy that applies to the board, I agree with Maggie that we should have sort of a general unanimous, if possible, consent. So it makes sense to do a little more vetting and wait, give ourselves a deadline, be at the end of the year. Because I think this is a step in the right direction. I think we should be doing something like this, but I think we all have to get to a point where we're comfortable with it. So that's where I am right now.
End of the year sounds right too.
Anyone? Oh, Ben, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just sort of ask this board, like, what substantively changes between now and then? Like, I think that there's discomfort with this language there will be. Like, I don't think this is maybe a policy that we're going to get to 100% consensus on. I just don't, because I think there's, for whatever reason, a discomfort with more specificity around accountability, which that's fine if you want that to be the case. But I mean, I think, as a board member, when the board speaks, you go uphold that opinion of the board, and if you choose to go against what the board voted on, then you do so in violation of this policy, and this spells out what the consequences of that looks like. So again, I have to ask, if you know what the expectations of behavior are, then why are we uncomfortable with the consequences of that behavior? And maybe some people just never will be. So I would say, let's vote on it tonight, see what happens. And, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. And we can come back and figure that out. But that's my motion.
Right?
Yeah, I still agree with Ben. I appreciate the way you're encapsulating the conversation tonight. This is just a tool for us to make sure things are good among the board. And to Claudia's point that she made a few minutes ago, if something were to elevate beyond just a chat, that might be a more severe action. Legal team would be advised at that point to make sure we're not stepping into something we shouldn't. So I am very comfortable where we're at. I understand concerns among other board members. So if the will of the board is to, come back to it later, that's perfectly fine too. And Maggie, I think, made a really good point that this is an existing policy, just for people listening. We're just looking to update this to make sure it's future-proof to a certain extent. So.
Very good. The motion on the floor right now is to vote to approve the entire list of policies, and we do have a second on that. So we could proceed and vote on that unless there's an amendment to that motion. Yes, Jess?
The original amendment that I would to make, so it would have been, I'd like to make a motion to leave. So it would be, if I'm right, 12 of the 13 policies stand, and then pull 209 separate. Because as you say that if we're voting on all of them, if we want to vote against 209, we have to say no to all of them.
Okay, so you have a motion on that. Jeff is making a motion to approve the entire list of policies minus 209.
And yes, and then I think I could do to that, it would be, and I wanted to add to the motion by
203 should be part of it. If you're
Okay,
talking about that,
203
203 has that new language that
Yeah.
points to 209. So if you, I mean, if that's the motion, I think it would be to remove 203 and 209.
And we had talked about that, and that was the original. So if you want me to stick with that, I would say 203 and 209. And then if I wanted to put that out, that we had a revision and we set a deadline, could I make that a part of the motion to do by the end of the year?
Yeah, you can add anything to a motion essentially that you'd like. So if a person was saying, I'd like to approve the list of policies except for 203 and 209 and redirect the policy committee to, consider those further and bring us a revised proposal no later than December 31st, 2026. You could certainly make that entire motion.
Okay.
I'm not sure you have to do that because I think there could be two things. I think you could do the piece of separating those two, and then just I think there could be good faith that it'll come back, but you could certainly be specific as well.
I'm just setting that as a deadline to the end of the year. We can go ahead and work on it and come up with something that makes sense. But so how would that motion read then? Do you have can you help me with some verbiage on that, Kelly, or how would you phrase that?
You could say that you move to approve the list of policies without 203 and 209 and leave it at that.
Yeah, I move to move the policies without 203 or 209.
Okay, I will ask for a second. Okay, thank you, Jenny. We can have discussion at this point if people want to talk about that removal, and then we can move to a vote. Okay, then we will move to.
Claudia, I'm just thinking through the amendment, if that's the appropriate amendment for the first motion. I think we need to remove 203 and 209 rather than vote on the 11 without 203 and 209. Because we already had a motion to vote all 13.
I think that the motion is to amend the original motion to remove 203 and 209 from that motion. So you're voting,
We're voting on 11.
I'm not able to vote for that because I want to approve 203 and 209 tonight. So the way the amendment is, I would vote no on all of them then. So that's why I'm saying it should be removed for a separate consideration.
That's what I originally wanted to do.
That's not, don't believe how it was worded though.
I always think about these amendments, Corey, like this, that you,
And also, Corey, you will have an opportunity to vote 203 and 209 next. Vote those up.
right.
So we're just.
That's not the way
chunking it.
the amendment sounded, so I appreciate the clarification. It sounded like we were making one motion and moving on after that would be approved.
I had talked about this earlier with Matt, and that's what
Yeah, I
we.
hear
I
that.
wasn't privy to that conversation.
Okay, so we definitely want the board to have an opportunity to vote on 203 and 209. And we want the board to approve the remainder of
11,
or
right.
consider approving the remainder of the policies. We have an amendment on the floor, which is a motion to approve the list of policies minus 203 and 209. Does that cover it or not?
I think you're saying that you're amending that this would remove 203 and 209 from the original motion. If you vote to say yes to that, then you go back to the top, right, to the amended motion, which is approve you're essentially voting on it twice, right? But you're initially saying we're going to amend the motion to read this way. You close the loop on that, and then you come back to the original motion that has been modified as a result.
And I think the concern is that there isn't a motion that would guarantee this 203, 209 to be voted on tonight.
Correct. Intent and the actual motion don't always align. So while we all are agreeing that the language has to be correct for Kelly in the minutes. So that's all I'm clarifying in case someone comes back later to challenge what we actually voted on. So I'll make sure it's clear that we're holding a second vote. So sorry if this was making it confusing, but
I don't know if
I-
we need that.
has a question.
Would one way to structure that motion is to remove policy 209 and 203 for separate consideration.
Right, that was,
Okay,
But you do have a motion and a second on the floor, so if you want to change it like that, I'd vote down that motion, and then it was the amendment, so then you'd come back with the amendment, the second amendment. Not the second amendment in the Constitution, but
So
the
we
second
need to-
amendment in this
so
discussion.
we need to
We'll get
we
there.
need to move forward with an amendment. We can't amend the amendment.
Can we?
I think you can amend the amendment, but I think it's cleaner just to probably vote that one down and come back and do it again.
Okay. Right. Kelly, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Call the question. I just call the question again for what the question is that we're
Oh, you
voting
want the
on.
motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, read the motion.
Quinnell moved to amend the motion to remove 203 and 209 and vote on the rest of the policies.
As an amendment, we're good to go. Did you, Maggie?
I'm still confused. But you said,
We're voting on the 11 as, you vote up or down on the 11 and the other two are pulled out.
No.
No.
We're voting on your amendment, whether we're going to then vote on the amendment.
Then go do that. Yeah, okay. So it's to move forward on that.
So the motion is an amendment to only vote on the policies minus 203 and 209.
Okay, gotcha.
Butler,
No.
Epstein,
aye.
Garowitz,
No.
Miller,
No.
Nelson,
No.
Quinnell,
No.
Gonzalez, George.
No. Okay, the amendment does not pass. Do we have a new amendment?
I'm not.
We can go back to the original motion unless there is an amendment.
I want the original motion.
Maggie,
I will move to amend the original motion and remove 203 and 209
Separate consideration.
for separate consideration. Thank you.
Okay, is there a second to the new amendment that includes separate consideration?
I'll second that.
Okay, Jeff seconds. Any discussion on that? Okay, Kelly, will you facilitate a roll call vote when you are ready?
Butler,
Yes.
Epstein,
Aye.
Garowitz,
Aye.
Miller,
No.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
No. That's 5-2. Okay, so now we.
Now you go
okay,
back to
so
the
now
original
we-
motion, yep, but we're removing 203 and 209s for separate consideration. So the motion now is, a motion has been amended to approve all of the policies that were presented with the exception of 203 and 209, which you will then consider separately as the next agenda item.
Do I need another motion now to reconsider 209, 203, 209?
No, because you've amended the motion to say it's gonna approve the policies as presented with the exception of 203 and 209, which will be considered separately. Correct, next, yes.
But do I need a new motion that says consider 203, 209?
After we vote.
This is for the 11.
Okay. So we are now voting on
Which is a yes, anyway.
the 11 policies as 203 and 209 were pulled out. Okay, go ahead,
So if
Kelly.
Start at 410, you can.
Okay,
if you
so
wanna
the
start-
policies that we're voting on right now are 410, 442, 503, 509, 530, 532, 533, 535, 540, 560, 655, and 701.
Butler,
Yes.
Epstein,
Aye.
Garowitz,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Okay, so those 11 policies pass. Is there a motion to consider policy 203 and 209 for approval?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Is there any discussion at this point? All right, then we will move to a vote on policies 203 and 209. Kelly, when you're ready.
Butler,
Aye.
Epstein,
No.
Garowitz,
No.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
No.
Quinnell,
No.
Gonzalez, George.
Yes. So the motion to consider to approve 203 and 209 does not pass. So 203 and 209 have not passed. So what do we,
Yeah, you
we
know,
don't have a process now.
yeah, if the board wants to give a direction, take a, have a motion for when it needs to be completed by, you certainly can do that. But really what this says to me is it goes back to the policy committee.
Okay, so
I don't think there's any additional action that you need, right? But and I
right.
appreciate, I just want,
Yeah.
this is why I'm proud of this board, because that was a complicated discussion that people engaged in a very genuine and fair way. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So the policy committee will bring back a recommendation at a later time this, this year. When is the next time they meet, in the fall?
We typically will meet we often start those in August again.
Okay, good. All right, we're moving on to item 8, which is items for information. There is a construction update number 27. Dr. Hellman, would you like to speak to that or let it stand?
I will quickly highlight it. So this is a similar report to what we had the last time at the last meeting. Sal Bagley from Old Architects and Engineers was here. She presented extensively, and in the construction update, there's a link right there that will take you to that part of the board meeting. So if you wanted to watch that report, they certainly can. She discussed things around value engineering and how we're looking forward to the next round of bidding that will be on June 16th. Those bids will be due at 10 a.m. We'll be opening them in this boardroom here. It's not a meeting, it's just opening of the bids. And then we will have the best value interviews for the mechanical package on the 17th. Amy is going to represent the board on that, as she did in the others. And then on June 24th, we'll have a special meeting at 5:15 to award the bids in this room. So we've got the groundbreaking, I want to give an update. We've got quite a few permits that have been submitted. We've actually are starting to hear on some of those, which is good. We have the groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for tomorrow, Tuesday, June 9th at 4 o'clock. It's in front of the high school, so right in front of door number 1. Board members are all invited to be part of that. You can do a ceremonial shovel turn, and we have Bubba Sullivan is going to speak. I'll speak. Claudia will speak. Dr. Anderson will also be speaking. So we invite people to join us for that. In addition, we continue the monthly budget meetings with Wold and Knudsen. The Project Oversight Committee continues to meet, and we're really looking forward to a great bid day on June 16th.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Dr. Hellman? Okay, Jenny?
Just a few questions on the value engineering portion that was in a separate report. I don't know if Matt or Amy might be able to answer. Just regarding the one value engineering removal, or I guess change, would be provide a second spray booth in the wood shop finishing space. Would that then take up extra classroom space?
So the concept behind that is to consolidate. It would take some additional classroom space, but my understanding is that it would also free up some other classroom space. Specifically from there's some spray booths that are currently in the art rooms that it would free up some space there. So the idea, my understanding of that idea, Jenny, without the technical details, is that it would consolidate what is needed for those kinds of spray booths in terms of the equipment, the ventilation of those kinds of things. So those spray booths would be shared by technology and engineering and the art department. I know that there's some additional discussions about how that might interface between art and the tech ed departments at this point. So they're still working through some of that, but it would likely take up a little bit more space, but it would also relieve some space elsewhere. I want to point out that those they'll be going back to the teams, the individual teams, to look through how they would do that in their space. So it's the user groups, excuse me. They're going back to the user groups to be able to discuss how that looks out. And there's been some discussion, I think both tech and engineering and art have some different thoughts about how they might move that forward with coming forward with their spray booth needs. So I'm not in that user group, so I can't speak to all the technical details, but the idea is to consolidate because there's some systems that we need to happen to be able to effectively have 2 of those in one space.
And then a second one was omit the CTE space fully. What does that mean?
Can you tell me where are you looking at that?
It's page 1 of the value engineering bid VE list.
Okay, just give me one moment, please.
It's on the very first page, down toward the second from the bottom. And I printed mine landscape, not portraits, so that might, I don't know if that changes the,
Yeah, no, thank you for. I'm gonna have to double check on that one for you because we're not omitting or removing, but Val, do you recall that particular one? Yes, it's the design team omit CT space fully from new work. Yes, that's right, okay. Right, so that's, yes, that's the, what it is it's taking some of the CTE updates and removing it from the construction budget, in which then it would be filled in with long-term facilities maintenance revenue, either alongside the project or as the project would move forward past the project. There's some of the things that we're pulling out of the construction budget in order to include in long-term facilities maintenance, either simultaneously with the project or as part of the regular long-term facilities maintenance approach. So it's about protecting the construction budget. That is my recollection of that particular item.
okay, it is $630,000 item though, and so that will be from LTFM, that entire amount?
It would be over time, depending on what
Okay.
they choose to attempt to do with that. Like, so there are some examples of leaving some finishes as are to begin with and continuing to upgrade those as we go down the line. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Wouldn't that be our choice then if we're taking it from LTFM instead of utilizing the construction funds?
Tell me more what you mean about our choice.
Well, you said over time.
Yes.
So then we would be able to distinguish, what that time frame would be.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
that's I should have been more clear, sorry. And then also the reduced welding booths, does that mean by how many or size?
So we will double the current number of welding booths from 3 to 6. We had hoped to have up to 10. So, it's going to be double what we have now, but not quite as much as we're hoping for.
Okay, and then the last one is under the theater lighting. So we accepted that, but it's it's savings. Do you know what that means? Is it a reduction or?
I don't know the answer to that right at this moment. I'll have to get you additional details.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Right, we'll move on to item B, which is the dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. The dates for filing for school board are July 14th through 28, 2026 in the district office. An affidavit of candidacy must be filed in the office of the school district clerk, and the $2 fee paid prior to 5 p.m. on Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. The next school board election will be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. Our future meetings are June 24th, 5:15, a special school board meeting to approve the NHS Reimagine project. That'll be in this boardroom. Monday, July 13th, 6 p.m., a regular board meeting, also in this boardroom. August 10, 2026, 6 p.m., another regular school board meeting. That is all the business that we have tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Maggie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Right, we are adjourned.